Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Tesla Life, episode 38 for January 24th, 2018. My name is Russell Frost, and I am confused by another noise that shouldn't be coming out of my computer. So much for my professional demeanor at the beginning of the show. Welcome to the 38th episode of the Tesla Life. Not a trivial episode by any means. You will remember episode 38 because we have a special guest for the entire length of the show. And I'm going to introduce him before I introduce the panel because he's our special guest, and I did it the other way last week. So his name is Jim McPherson. He is an attorney specializing in autonomous vehicle law. He is an educator and an advocate full-time on this topic. You can find him at safeselfdrive.org or at safeselfdrive on Twitter. I highly recommend following him. An amazing guy. Everybody, welcome Jim McPherson.
Welcome, Jim.
Hey, thanks, Russell. Thanks for that introduction. Hello, Mark. Hello, Evan. I'm looking forward to speaking with you guys today.
There we go. And just because of the way things work, Jim hasn't even had a chance to talk to anybody else. So, yeah, it's going to be we're going to kind of chat it up here during the thing. You know him as he's my wingman in Canada for the Tesla Life. I like to think of him as simply Mark Coughlin.
Thanks very much, Russell. Simply Mark is here. Yes, indeed. Looking forward to another good
That's
show.
Different than Simple Mark.
Yeah, that could be trouble right there.
Weren't you a really popular band in the 80s? Yeah, I get confused. There was all that music stuff. And on the other side is a man who should have a raccoon tan because he's been skiing for the last week. Yes, I hate him for that. But nonetheless, I will welcome him with some respect. Our friend, Dr. Evan Fusco.
Hey, it's good to be back, everyone. I did have a nice week of skiing. It was bluebird skies the whole time, and we had a great time. Came home right before the bad storms hit, so can't complain. And I can't get my lower banner to work this week. So if anyone, on pins and needles of what happened from the last time I was on the show, I changed my preferences for the Tesla Model 3, and I did, along with a large number of other people, so I don't know if it really made a difference, get my invitation to configure, and immediately put a hold on it, saying that I was going to wait till the dual motor. So it'll be a few months before I get anything.
So you did all that just so you could see that you get a configuration notice.
I like to think of it as I was doing a service for our vast audience.
Showing them what could be done. Yes, indeed.
Exactly.
But I have to ask, when you put in for the dual motor, what does it kick it back to?
It's interesting. It didn't give me a specific date. I think it's still showing mid 2018.
Yeah.
But there was an option to select that you wanted to delay your order till a specific month, which was interesting. So I actually selected just semi-randomly September. And so I put that down. So I don't know if they'll just hold my order until then and then reach out to me in September and say, do you want it now or what will happen? So I'm not really ready to buy right now anyway. So it works out well for me that way.
Yeah. I mean, you probably got to save up a couple of dollars, that grocery job you do in the evenings.
Yeah.
I get that.
Selling my body $20 at a time, it takes a while.
Oh my gosh.
On layaway, I'm going to say. Okay, enough of that talk. We have an attorney in the house. Let's have a little respect for the legal system.
Carry on.
So, Jim, keeping in mind, I'm keeping in mind that this is a Tesla-focused show. What do you think right now is the most interesting AV-related legal issue with regard to our friends at Tesla?
Well, it's autopilot, of course. I mean, Tesla has the level 2 system and people are using it every day. And it's exciting because it gives people a new way to drive, but it's also potentially dangerous if it's going to lull them into a false sense of security. So in a lot of ways, Tesla owners are the guinea pigs for the rest of us because this looks like it's coming to every auto manufacturer out there, except maybe they're really high-end sports cars. So thank you, Dr. Evan, for being the guinea pig.
I like being a guinea pig. Yeah, so I guess that's a good point. At what point What is that responsibility of being lulled? You know, am I responsible because I was lulled, or is Tesla responsible for lulling me?
I think the gentleman with the nice shirt is probably best positioned.
You know, a striped shirt is also a bad idea for television, isn't it? It gives kind of a noir effect.
Yes. Ooh, yes. Very good. Oh, he must be a photographer as well.
Wow. I
I
have taken pictures in the past.
Uh-huh.
Uh-huh.
I don't have an answer for you, Russell.
Okay.
It's an open question.
Oh, you know what we should say? Do you have Mr. McPherson is not here to offer specific legal advice, nor does anything he say constitute legal advice. We're here discussing general topics of a legal nature. So, act responsibly.
Perfect disclaimer, Russell. And when I saw the ads you placed for this show, I was afraid we were going to get people calling in saying, my ex door won't close, or I want to invoke the warranty, or I want to sue somebody, and I'm not here to do that.
I'm not going to go down a rabbit hole here, but one of the things, I love like talk shows and podcasts and stuff. And that's one of the things I hate about call-in shows. And inevitably, whatever topic it is, someone finds a way to relate it to the most personal thing possible and take up 10 minutes going, my aunt's grandmother, da-da-da-da-da. It's like, okay. Anyway, so
speaking of lulling to sleep,
let's get into it then. Shall we?
I think this might be an instance of that just happened in Culver City. Sharing a photo here of what happened recently on the highway. A Model S ended up slamming into a back of a parked fire truck that was responding to something else on the freeway. And this, very luckily, the driver walked away, was not injured.
Amazing.
And you can see it's quite a crash. So it is certainly amazing that he walked away without any injury. But here's a situation where the car was zipping along and hit the fire truck at a great velocity, allegedly 65 miles an hour. And allegedly, the car was in autopilot. But the NSTB is going to be investigating this. They're sending out a field team to figure out what happened. Since the driver's obviously alive and can talk about it, they're going to interview him and collect some information about this. And, that certainly could take quite some time, because the last one, we didn't get an official account of events until many months away. But this is what happens when, well, I don't know if this is what happens every time. Obviously, it's not. But this is what can happen if you are lulled to sleep by the autonomous actions of the car that have worked to that point.
Yeah. What's a little bit curious on this one is that, Tesla hasn't announced anything. That often in the past, they've kind of come out with a statement saying, we pulled the data and they were not an autopilot, or we pulled the data and they were. But we haven't heard anything from Tesla this time around. Maybe somebody's taken away Elon's Twitter.
Well, gentlemen, maybe you can explain something to me about how autopilot works, because my understanding is it's a combination suite, if you will, of a adaptive cruise control with an auto steer function. Is there something else to autopilot besides that?
Well, so if you include that's definitely the main components. I guess I'm not sure if you're asking about how it functions in this particular case. And, there's sonar and then the forward-looking radar rather than LiDAR, which a lot of companies are claiming is necessary for adequate full self-driving capability. But definitely those are the two main functions. And so there's emergency braking built in there. And then it'll also, self-disengage if you don't provide input to the steering wheel at some point and slow you down. Like you probably have it queued up, Mark, that other story about the DUI driver who recently was found on the side of the road, apparently in autopilot, and the car pulled itself over to the side of the road while the guy was passed out. Until the police came and arrested him.
Before we run to the drunk one, though, Evan, I'm just curious. So, autopilot doesn't function with the nav at all?
Not currently, no.
So, autopilot, in other words, autopilot won't change freeways or get off the freeway or make turns independently.
Correct. Well, okay, it'll take curves, but it won't make it won't drive down a city street and make a right turn on Main Street and a left on Elm. Right. It won't do that.
It'll as long as you're on the same freeway, then you're okay. But
now we do know that Tesla's using current drivers to collect data to eventually integrate that level of functionality into it for the full self-driving. But currently it doesn't do anything of that sort. Now it will come to complete stop in if there's a vehicle in front of you, and then it'll take off again when the vehicle pulls away, returning to its previous driving speeds. But other than that, I mean, it doesn't recognize a stop sign. It doesn't recognize a stop light. So if there's not somebody already stopped there, it's blowing through it.
It's blowing through it.
Wow. I didn't know that. That's interesting. Yeah. So Evan, which piece of the suite was responsible for spotting, a giant fire truck in the lane? Is that the radar? Is that the steer?
In that case, I would think that would be the forward-looking radar, on that. And I don't know, that particular Model S. There's two different versions of the autopilot in the Model S or in Tesla's suite right now. I don't know if you're aware of that. Possibly three, I guess, if you consider the Model 3. But I think that falls under the AP2. So there's Autopilot 1, which is what's in my wife's Model X, and so that's the only one I have firsthand experience with. And Model AP2 added multiple other cameras to the sensor suite, and for whatever reason, it's been much more difficult for Tesla to progress the functionality of Autopilot 2. And integrate all those additional cameras and sensors that it currently has. So Autopilot 1 actually for a long time had more functionality than Autopilot 2, the more advanced version, because of that difficulty with the integration. So I'm not sure on Autopilot 2 what all would be responsible, but what I've heard online is that for some reason that Autopilot 2 has a very difficult time identifying stopped vehicles in traffic. I don't know why that is.
That is the best explanation I've heard. And I'll tell you, in preparation for this show, I was watching a lot of YouTube videos of people explaining how Autopilot works on their own car. Every single one of them had a different explanation as to how it works. And they all took turns making mistakes, like taking their hands completely off the wheel, looking around to the back seat, saying it's completely self-driving. I worry that not everyone understands what their Tesla is capable of, but I really appreciate that explanation from you. I took notes, actually.
Okay. Yeah, it's a little frustrating that people don't seem to fully understand what it's capable of, because I think it's pretty clear. When you turn it on, it explains you have to keep your hands on the wheels. It tells you have to keep your hand on the wheel when you activate Autopilot from the beginning. You get flashes on the dash initially. If you don't have your hands on the steering wheel, it beeps it if you don't have your hands on the steering wheel and don't acknowledge the flashes, and then eventually it beeps and disengages completely. But if you look around on the internet, people are taping oranges to their steering wheel to provide lateral torque so that it will defeat that safety mechanism that's on there. So my belief is more that people do know and yet choose to become lackadaisical about utilizing it as it's designed.
And I think we talked about that on What Drives Us last week, that everybody's in a hurry to have level 4. It's a really cool thing to have if you can let go of the wheel and pay attention to something else. But it would be nice if it could do everything for you and we didn't have to worry about it.
Yeah, which no one's really been able to do yet on a point-to-point. Unlimited things we've seen different autopilot systems that work, but nothing yet. I mean, again, obviously we're still early in development, but nobody yet has demonstrated that they have the full sensor suite and the computing power to really compete with a human operator.
Right. David, Glotfelty on the chat room and just mentioned it seems like not spotting a stopped obstacle seems like a big problem, and it is. And I don't have the technical expertise to explain why that is so difficult for these systems to do. Because you're right, it seems like the simplest of all the things that it should be able to do is see that something's not moving in front of it and stop. But you know, the crash a couple years ago, the guy was watching Harry Potter videos and crashed into the side of a semi truck that was crossing the road in front of him. You know, that was a similar situation. I mean, this gigantic semi truck trailer blocking the entire highway, and the car doesn't recognize it. It just plowed right into it full speed. And then if you know, obviously we don't have the facts on this fire truck, so I don't want to assume, but assuming that it was in autopilot, driver wasn't paying attention, and the vehicle was stopped directly in front of it. You know, it does kind of seem like one of those things that's a little baffling, and there's probably somebody really smart out there that can explain why that's so difficult for it to recognize.
In that article that Mark posted, I think I read it today, a spokesperson for Tesla said that auto steer is not intended to avoid obstacles partially or even all the way in the lane. And that seemed like an odd quote to me, because I wonder what it's supposed to do if not that.
Well, Evan, have they reactivated AEB yet?
What's AEB?
The automatic emergency braking.
I don't know. I guess I didn't know it was deactivated.
Yeah, they had. We did a story a month or two ago. Mark, do you recall that?
That was on AP2.
Okay.
Yeah,
they had deactivated automatic braking, which one might speculate might have prevented the fire truck thing. Yeah. The other thing I was going to say, just to toss a random number in, Jim and Evan, is, you know, I drive a different car every week, and I have noticed on one manufacturer's car who's going to remain nameless for now, has a real problem with driving down the freeway in their dynamic cruise control, which otherwise works really well. Driving down the freeway, somebody cuts you off from the right, and the sensors don't pick it up quick enough.
So that's interesting, because in with our AP1 and the Model X, I actually get really annoyed that it seems overly sensitive to vehicles that are partially in the lane. So there'll be a vehicle in front of us that, you know, it's on the autopilot, you know, whatever setting that we have it on, and they're exiting on an off ramp, or on ramp, I guess in this case, and I know that by the time I get there, even though they're slowing down, I'll easily miss them. But the car will beep, 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 and brake and slow down. And like, I have to hit the accelerator so I don't like slow down so much that somebody rams me from behind. Right. So it seems overly aggressive in those situations to me. So I'm a little baffled too by the Tesla spokesperson's statement there, because at least in our vehicle, it's very sensitive to those kind of situations, and maybe overly so. But I guess better safe than sorry.
Jim, maybe I got this wrong from last week, but I thought you had mentioned something about the different levels of autonomy and where the responsibility lies based on that level. Was it something about 1, 2, and 3 are the driver's responsibility, and then 4 and 5 would be the manufacturer? Or am I incorrect on that?
You're correct on that.
Okay. So with the current Teslas, they're all, you know, up to a level 3, possibly. And so it doesn't matter really what situation happens. The driver is responsible for everything that would go on in that car, correct?
There's a little bit of a nuance to level 3 in which the car is supposed to be monitoring the environment for you, and then it advises you to take over within a certain amount of time. Waymo has already declared that that's an impossible standard to meet. They're skipping right over it to go to level 4. You know, there's an argument to be made that level 2 is just a poorer version of level 3. And if we decide that level 3 is unsafe, maybe we should take a look at the propriety of level 2 as well. You know, I mentioned this last week. It's a wild west right now, and the laws 10 years from now aren't going to look like they do today.
Well, mostly there aren't a lot of laws right now, right?
Yeah, very few.
It's the Wild West. It's it's not like we have an existing body of law that we're not paying attention to or anything. It's really, we haven't invented it yet.
So let me take you back to some, how much has that rough rule, the level 1 through 3 is the driver's responsibility, been tested in the courts? In this, if the guy that ran into the fire truck, let's say he was using autopilot and he sues Tesla for not recognizing a stopped vehicle in the middle of the road. Have we seen that really tested? Is there precedent that we can stand on, or is that just sort of the assumption currently in the law?
That's a terrific question, Evan, because the rule comes to us from SAE International. It was adopted by NHTSA, so it has the force of NHTSA regulations, but there's no state anywhere, as far as I know, that has had a chance to rule under state tort law that a car that's a level 2 is always the responsibility of the driver. A state may go rogue and say, you know what? Tesla should be responsible, even if they say the driver's responsible. You also have that separate click wrap agreement when you set autopilot, where you have to say, okay, I acknowledge I'm responsible from here. So that's another legal issue you have to deal with. But You're right, it hasn't been tested in the courts yet.
Wow.
So with all these other, automakers coming out with it, and of course Tesla starting to ramp up their Model 3 and get more and more cars on the road, I would think that this is going to come up pretty fast. I'm thinking there's going to be a lot of action on the law side of things because we as humans tend to have a lot of accidents, and we love to blame other people for what happened. So I got to believe that there's going to be a lot of activity in this sector really soon.
We found out yesterday that the first lawsuit has been filed related to autonomy. It was a cruise automation vehicle in San Francisco that had an incident with a motorcyclist, and the motorcyclist is suing General Motors in federal district court here in California. The cause of action alleged is negligence, and we'll have to see how that plays out. It's going to happen more and more as these cars are being tested, number one, for their level 4 capabilities, and also in the lower levels where people are monitoring and supervising cars in levels 1 to 3 automation.
Yeah, I think the other part that's going to be interesting legally is, a lot of things we do as drivers are maybe not strictly by the rules of the road as defined in your handbook that you did, but are sort of accepted as, you wave somebody through an intersection or something like that, right? And as far as I know, my Tesla has never waved anyone through an intersection. So, and so if people, until everything's autonomous, it's kind of interesting. You got to think there are going to be some incidents like that where a computer-controlled vehicle is acting like a computer instead of a human, and there's going to be incidents related to that. And then where do you assign that blame, or that responsibility when there's an accident or a bad outcome?
Well, to the extent that hand gestures and eye contact and things like that are a part of driving, if we consider those driving, is it something that we should require the manufacturers to include in their programming, the ability to sense it, to understand it? Or are we going to let them get away with less than that and let them only worry about what's moving, just the exterior of the car? They can react a lot faster than we can, but we seem to be able to predict better than they can.
Right.
So it's not that one is better than the other, but when they're both mixed together, can they coexist?
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. If you could get rid of all the human element, I mean, it should work almost perfectly.
Let me ask you, Evan, would you still want a Tesla if it didn't have self-driving capability?
Oh, mine doesn't have any self-driving. I don't even have parking sensors on my Model S. So yeah, absolutely. There's a lot more to it than that. I think, to me, that's like the fun little bonus feature to have the autopilot. I'm not sure I even want full self-driving at this point. in fact, there's some discussions online about, it's $4,000 if you want to add full self-driving to your Model S if you buy it right now, even though it's not available. But if you wait till it's available, it's $5,000, right? So you gotta pay extra later. And I'm like, yeah, no, I don't think I'm going to get that when I buy mine. I'll wait, and maybe I'll throw $4,000 into Tesla stock and see if I can make my $1,000 extra there or something. But yeah, I don't know. I'm old enough that I like being the boss of my car and holding the steering wheel and pushing the pedal to the floor at the rate I want to push the pedal to the floor. And I don't know that I have the patience for a autonomous vehicle to completely do its thing just yet.
Mark and Russell, what about you guys?
I'm not a fan of autonomy, not really at all. On my Model 3, I am definitely not springing for the full autonomy. I'll stay out of it. I'm from an area where there's obviously less traffic than, say, someplace like where Russell is in California, but I don't have any issues with driving the car myself, and I am driving it because it's electric, and I am driving it because of the torque, and I am driving it because it's a fun car to zip around it. But I want to do the zipping. I'm the one that wants to control it. So I'm out on autonomy. It would be interesting to try and experience, but I can't see myself letting the car drive me around. Just not at that stage. I can't.
So for myself, if autonomy existed, I would love it. I enjoy driving, but I also don't enjoy driving, especially in Southern California. Things like dynamic cruise are my best friend. And lane keep assist and all of that. Not because I'm sleeping or I'm playing cards or I'm getting drunk, but because in heavy traffic, something like dynamic cruise is incredibly useful. Otherwise, driving in traffic is just fatiguing and tedious. Right. So I love the early steps toward autonomy. That said, I honestly, and I've said this on What Drives Us, I feel like autonomy is hype that's being sold to people. It's a promise that's not being kept. And I think autonomy is a little farther off than most people imagine. It's not a 2020 or a 2025 thing. It's maybe like a 2035 thing. Before we see actual get in the car, tell you where it's going to go from point to point, not go down a special freeway in a special lane or a special lane down a designated surface street. That's not really autonomy. That's a bus, and we have those already. They're not a big deal. So how's that for an answer?
That's a great ansr. And, I like that hypothetical where, it is real, it is safe. Let's take those for granted.
Okay.
Is $4,000 or $5,000 a bargain for the ability to have a chauffeur full-time everywhere you go, never need to have a taxi? Oh my God, yes.
Definitely.
What a bargain. So I don't think people will blink twice at the potential. I mean, now if you want to put in $4,000 in stocks and think it'll grow to $5,000 before Tesla comes out with autopilot, then maybe do that instead. But it's neat to know they're including all the hardware, allegedly, that will be necessary to run it.
And Evan, I'm not sure, but I think isn't it 3,000 on the Model 3 and then 4,000?
Yeah, so I got Matt on the chat room corrected me there. It's $3,000 now and $4,000 if you wait till later. I think it's the autopilot I was thinking about, but yeah. Right. So I guess another question that occurred to me and why I think I would wait is that I'm going to assume Tesla's not going to give me my $3,000 back if the Model 3 gets crashed before full self-driving becomes available. Right. I mean, I haven't purchased anything I can put my hands on. I don't have anything of substance I can put on a shelf and wait and keep safe. I crash my car, it gets totaled.
that ability goes with it. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. So it's a little hard to rationalize paying that money up front unless you just have no other way to pay it than to roll it into a loan or something. And like you say, I think it's going to be significantly longer than 5 years probably before we're seeing it fully activated.
Yeah. So many. Go ahead.
Jim, I was curious to know what your opinion is of the self-driving. Would that be something that you would pay for if it was available personally?
Available and safe? Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
You know, I follow all these urban planners now because they are the ones talking about how automated vehicles are going to be used in the future, how we're going to redesign cities, how we're going to get around. And they are all predicting and hoping that cars will be shared, autonomous, and electric, and that we will hail them on a per ride basis. It's called mobility as a service or transportation as a service. I can tell you, if it only costs $3, $4, or $5 to turn your own car into a full-time taxi cab for yourself, you're never going to hire a taxi cab or an Uber or mobility as a service. You will already have it. You will own it. And it's potentially going to make traffic a real nightmare. But as far as that price goes, 3, 4, 5, it's a lot of money potentially wasted now because you're making a big gamble. But when it's here and when it's safe, that's the bargain of the century.
Sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But that when is the huge gamble. And I don't think most people appreciate how fiendishly complex this problem is. I think most people go, hey, a 16-year-old can drive, and don't appreciate even a 16-year-old's brain is much more subtle and much better at doing some things than our current level of AI. Reaction, Evan said it earlier, reaction time and whatnot, definitely the machines win, but there are other things that we're still so much better. I mean, reading signs that may not be standardized. What happens when you go through that neighborhood and it's never seen that deaf child sign before? Does the car just stop and wait for instructions from the home office?
Yeah. Well, and you even think you're driving by a park and you see kids playing football out of the corner of your eye, and the football starts flying that direction and a kid starts running for it. I can anticipate that kid might run out in the road and take my foot off the accelerator and keep a closer eye on him. The car has to wait until it actually enters the frame of the camera and then decide to brake, and maybe it'll brake in time and maybe it won't. And what about snow-covered roads that we all drive on in the winter, right? How is that going to happen? There's so many little things that I just can't. I have no idea how they're going to get going.
Yeah, there's a ton of them for sure. It's like you said, it's anyone's guess. It's going to be long, the long haul. But just like anything else in human evolution, it's something that we'll take bits and pieces of it, we'll run with it, we'll perfect those, and then move on to another thing, and then discover, well, this kind of fell off. We have to fix that, and we have to go back and do this and fix that again. But we'll get there, I'm sure. It's just a matter of experience that has to happen.
I just couldn't bring myself to say I'm sure. I'm not saying that we can't do it. We can. It's just, I don't, again, the scope of the problem is so enormous. Standardizing everything, updating road surfaces and all of that stuff. I mean, we're talking about a huge amount of work. Ignore the money, just the amount of time and work and effort so that self-driving vehicles can operate safely. It's huge. Hey, I wanted, Matt, my apologies, Matt. Obadia in the chat room wanted to know if you're presently working on any AV cases.
No, not presently working on any AV litigation. I'll have to leave it at that.
Okay. Fair enough. You are kind of, I mean, taking your career is taking a sort of a different turn away from litigation and more into advocacy and education, as I understand it. Is that fair?
Yeah. So later on this week, I'll be speaking to a group of attorneys and educating them about the status of the law, issues of liability, things that might change before the legislation passes, what California DMV might do. And then in May, I'm going to be speaking at the San Francisco Trial Lawyers Association. Oh, you disappeared there. I hope I'm still on.
You are, yes.
Okay. I'm sorry.
Talking to them about how to steer pun intended, a driverless car case through trial if you're a plaintiff's attorney.
Very.
So wasn't my title, but I'm going to go with it.
So you're starting with full autonomous type cases rather than focusing now on what's currently on the road?
So my last practice involved a combination of representing shopping centers and doing some personal injury work for friends on the side. And so I discovered as I started studying autonomy that there were not just issues of liability and safety, but that places like shopping centers were going to have to redesign in order to accommodate vehicles that don't park. So, shopping centers that have acres and acres of parking now don't need it. They can redevelop it into something else. How are they going to configure their drop zones to maximize people coming and going? Let's say you have a stadium like AT&T Park in San Francisco. We get 10,000 cars parked at the stadium each day for a game. What if all 10,000 cars have people in them that want to be dropped off and then go back onto surface streets? How is the city going to manage that? Is it going to force them to park? How far does that 10,000th car have to go to pick up its next passenger when 9,999 are already picking up the nearer ones? It's a big mess.
Yeah. It's a huge mess.
So the industries that I anticipated speaking to, things like insurance, I've received a few calls, but most of them are trying to figure out how they're going to price the risk, and they have to deal directly with the manufacturers who are reluctant to provide it. So who knows? My job is kind of evolving, but as of yesterday with this new lawsuit, everybody wants to know, well, what do you think of the complaint, and what do you think the defenses should be? I've got a lot of strong opinions, and unfortunately, I can't share them here.
No, why is that? Are you involved? No, seriously, are you involved in them or no?
No, I might be. So
okay.
If there's a potential to be, then it's best that I not opine.
Fair enough.
Speaking of insurance, David from the chat room asked a question, and I'm not sure I understand it completely, but he asked, what about insurance? What are the insurance companies saying, or does no fault kick in? I mean, any indication of how insurance is looking at AV cars?
Well, in California, for a autonomous vehicle level 4 testing permit, you need to obtain a $5 million liability policy. Wow. That's tough. There aren't too many insurance companies that will insure that. We know that Munich Reinsurance, will reinsure a primary insurer who's got an appetite for that kind of risk. They're already starting to do it in the UK, I believe. So in asking around, that seems to be where everyone's looking for the policy if they want to insure their cars. But anyone who's developing self-driving cars right now probably has enough money to self-insure and bear that risk themselves rather than pay the huge premiums it would take to buy a policy.
Wow. Yeah, I can't.
As for Tesla, Evan, do you have any special riders or anything that you needed to obtain in order to have autopilot?
Yeah, nothing at all. And I suspect the industries just don't give them any ideas.
As soon as they can charge you for it, they certainly will. But the question is, maybe more importantly, so if autopilot could be implied in any kind of accident that you have, would they cover it?
Well, there's an insurance company out there that is trying to get Tesla business, and I believe Tesla is sending them customers, promising them a discount on the basis of having autopilot and using it. Now, they don't know for sure yet whether that's a worthy risk, but they're certainly getting customers out of it, and they'll find out very quickly whether that's a bargain.
So they're going to have to learn like everyone else on the fly.
Yes, they will.
Yeah, it's like you said, it's the Wild West in many senses of the word across the board. There's many disruptions that are about to happen. When you were talking about AT&T Stadium, I just had the thought, and someone copied or agreed with that on Twitter or on our chat room, was that what happens to all the guys that collect money for parking spots if these cars are autonomous and can just come and pick you up at the stadium or drop you off and then go someplace else? All of a sudden, you've got a stadium with an empty parking lot.
Well, by my calculations, it would take 8.5 hours to drop off everyone at the stadium, and then another 8.5 hours to pick them all up again.
Okay, so there's a difference for sure.
Wow, you've done the math on that. and parking for I've heard that parking for a Giants game is anywhere between $75 and $150. It's not.
I've seen it $100 across from the ballpark. Yeah.
Okay, so my old office is right where the park edge is, so I got displaced and then I left San Francisco. But
well, my question for you, and this is something that it has nothing to do with autonomy, but you think about Ubers and Lyfts right now. The same situation could apply. What if everyone decided to take Uber or Lyft to the game? Nobody's paying for parking. All the same amount of traffic is still arriving. The city of San Francisco just gets inundated, and it's going to take all that time for people to be dropped off. So should the city be doing something to start charging people for drops in very congested areas? Or should it be barring drops anywhere near a stadium on game day? Make people take public transportation. It's everything intersects: autonomy, TNCs, transportation. It's fascinating. Sure. I'm just trying to cover the law side of it.
Yeah. No, I mean, this is me on what drives us, not so much me on the Tesla life. But I mean, let's be realistic. The problem is cars. The cars aren't the solution. Autonomy isn't the solution to some car problems. It's just making the problem worse or making the problem different.
I like to say it solves driving, but it doesn't solve cars.
Yeah. Definitely. Will it make vehicular travel safer? Probably when AV is deployed amongst a good part of the vehicles. I think it will. Will it in some situations make traffic flow better? Absolutely, but not in every situation. And again, the baseball game thing is a brilliant. God, I'm kicking myself because I never thought of that. I mean, it's a brilliant way of looking at it. 10,000 cars lined up to drop off people at Pac Bell Park. And if you've never driven in that neighborhood, it is not fun to drive in.
Well, you can imagine a restaurant, right? A really popular restaurant. Everybody drives up in their Tesla and sends it on its way, to circle while you're in having dinner. It's kind of like the valet takes your car and drives around the city and doesn't bring it back until you leave to go.
Exactly. And if you just look at the simple math of people going to work, their car could drive them to work and then it would go home and sit in the driveway. Well, that in itself just doubles the amount of cars on the road, because now that car is not sitting at work waiting for you. It took an extra trip to drive down the road to go back home to wait in your driveway and then come pick you up, and again, double the trip, come picking you up and dropping you off. So yeah, it's going to contribute to the congestion problem for sure.
Yeah. Again, the problem is cars, and more cars doesn't solve the problem. The solution obviously is less cars for people that have no other way to get there. The solution at Pac Bell Park was putting the train in on the one side of the park that didn't exist there when I worked there. The one on what is it, Embarcadero?
Yeah.
Forgive me, because that's like 20 years ago in my head. So,
well, this is the Tesla show. So let me ask you, now that Tesla is a sustainability, environmental corporation, do you see them ever getting into bicycles, electric bikes?
I'll start. It certainly fits in with Tesla's mission as they've stated it. I don't see why they couldn't. A Tesla branded e-bike would be pretty darn cool. And e-bikes are certainly, as we mentioned, I've been looking at them for the last couple of weeks. E-bikes are certainly a cool option to somebody who wants to commute, wants a really ecologically low impact vehicle to commute on, but doesn't necessarily want an hour session in the gym. you know what I mean, that a bicycle can represent. So you get something that's easier on you, that gets you there, but doesn't have a tailpipe or doesn't have 4 wheels. So yeah, I don't see how it doesn't fit into Elon's vision as he has expressed it, that Tesla couldn't get into a wide range of things. 2 years ago, did anybody see them going solar?
Yeah.
It makes perfect sense. And
I believe they've got more low-hanging fruit that they will pick before they get to a bicycle of sorts or a scooter. But certainly, I think they can get there. It's just whether or not they have the time to handle it with the other projects that will be kicking off and are currently being designed. But yeah, they could get there, definitely.
I don't put anything past Elon, though. I don't think it's on the immediate horizon.
Yeah. Now, you asked me if it was possible. Do I think it'll happen? No. I think Elon's very comfortable. Elon likes to think of himself as a thinker out of the box, and he certainly has in some cases. But a lot of his solutions are very, dare I suggest it, maybe one-dimensional. I mean, 4-wheeled vehicles are the answer. And that's so far. I would loved it if he'd made a motorcycle or a scooter or a bicycle.
Now, is there a pickup truck coming?
There is.
Allegedly, yeah.
They say it will be coming to market after the Model Y. That will be, which of course is the next vehicle after the 3. So he's already gone on record in stating that the pickup designs are in his head, and it will be the next to arrive after the Model Y.
I haven't seen a Model Y. Is there a model?
There is no Model Y.
Okay.
there's a silhouette. That's all that exists of the Model Y.
Yeah. So one of the other, let's see, there was another question in the chat room. David B. want to know if the hosts were using autopilot at all, and what has been your experience?
Well, I answered in the chat, and I do. When my wife allows me to drive her Model X, and honestly, I get typically when she allows me to drive it is on the situations where autopilot is most appropriate. So if we are taking a family trip from our home Springfield, Missouri area up to St. Louis or to Kansas City, and we're on the highway, that's where we typically use it, and it's outstanding. I just love it. It makes the trip so much more relaxing. And when people ask me about it, I describe it as cruise control on steroids. You add that auto steer component there, and it's just one less thing that requires your intense focus the whole time. You're still paying attention. You're still looking at the road, but you don't have to continually think about making adjustments. Just like with a regular cruise control, you don't have to continually monitor the speed and adjust up when you've dropped 2 miles per hour or slow down when you've gone up 2 miles. It just takes care of it for you. And you maintain your situational awareness and, put on the turn signal when you want to change lanes and pass somebody, and put it back when you want to go back into your proper lane. It's great. I absolutely love using our autopilot on those types of trips. I tend to not use them on hilly, curvy rural roads because it doesn't handle it very well. It has a hard time navigating, topping a small rise and then a curve immediately following. And it ends up being more of a wrestling match between me and the autopilot in those situations. So I think for what it's designed to do, it does a great job. If you try to push it outside those more specific parameters, it struggles.
Interesting. Well, let's sort of start heading in the direction of wrapping this up. I guess there was a story in Automotive News. I don't know if you saw it, Jim. And I'm not even going with the headline, but just that people in Congress are apparently discussing some bipartisan legislation to promote safe development of autonomous vehicles. Have you heard anything about this? Do you know anything?
I think there are some Democratic senators who are holding up the AV START bill in committee.
Yes.
Partly because they're concerned about truckers losing their jobs. Partly they're concerned about safety, deploying them before they're ready. And I think part of it has to do with cybersecurity as well. But, you know, it's politics. It's Washington. There are issues much bigger than AV legislation at play. And so trying to guess who or why things get held up, you know, it's petty grudges, it's other legislation, it's horse trading. We'll just have to wait and see.
Yeah.
Sure. Absolutely. I mean, you know, I guess maybe the question should be, is it time for AV legislation? Do we need an AV law structure right now, since we don't even have the vehicles? I mean, should there be a structure in place, or do we wait until we're closer to that so we know what we're dealing with?
Wish I had the answer for you, Russell. I'd like to see some data from the manufacturers. Then we could all make an educated decision about it.
Okay.
And like you said, they're not sharing any of that, are they?
Not willingly. California is about to, well, at this time of year, every year, the manufacturers who have testing permits and are deploying their vehicles on California streets have to report what's called disengagements. Those are times when their level 4 car dropped the ability to drive itself, or prompted the driver to take over, or the driver just took over because the computer wasn't doing what they thought it should. And then we get to look through those and try and read the tea leaves and figure out, is there a manufacturer that has a particular problem with, say, you know, left turns or bicycles or wet weather?
Taco trucks?
Taco trucks, right. But apparently each manufacturer interprets these disengagements their own way. So there's no real standard way to report them. And it's a little hard to tell who's ahead of the race just by the mere number of disengagements. You know, whoever has the most disengagements is probably doing the most testing and also has the most safe miles driven. Right.
Or they may just have a lower threshold for when it disengages. And
exactly.
Yeah, it's really, really hard to.
It's hard to tell, but it is informative, and I think it helps. And I would just like to see more of it as well.
Okay. You know what, Mark? Way back at the beginning of the show, I totally stepped on you. My apologies about the drunk dude. And I think briefly, can we talk about the drunk guy?
Yeah, it was something that happened in last Friday, where a man had actually passed out from drinking in his Tesla Model S while he was trying to drive across the Bay Bridge. And according to the report, the man fell asleep in bumper-to-bumper traffic, whereupon other drivers on the road, you know, were calling the police, basically, because this guy looked passed out in the car. And the CHP showed up to assess the problem or what they had seen. And I guess the car was pulled over to the side, and the driver was woken up, and his comment to the officer on duty was, "It's okay, the car's in autopilot," which obviously didn't go over well with the policeman. So he was thinking that, hey, it's cool as long as I had autopilot on, it's just fine. And when they tested him with the breathalyzer or test, he was twice the legal limit, and he was arrested and charged with drunk driving. And then the police, they, with a bit of sense of humor, they indicated through a CHP San Francisco Twitter post that this person was arrested, and no, the car was towed and didn't drive itself to the impound yard. So yeah, that's the first we've heard of that. But you know, is that education? Is that a person really thinking that the car can do it all itself? I don't know. I don't know what the answer is here.
And there was some poor judgment going on all around.
Yeah. So
drunk driving is just a terrible thing, and it's actually awfully common on the Bay Bridge because people come into the city, they go out to the restaurants and bars, and they try to make their way home a little tipsy. And so the police do hang out around the Bay Bridge, and they're frequently jumping on cars that are weaving. I'll tell you a quick story because I know time is short, but
Take your
I
time.
actually served on a jury in San Francisco for a drunk driving case of a man who had his birthday in the city and lived in the East Bay. So at the end of the night, there were a bunch of shots on the table. He drank them all in addition to what he had already had to drink.
Jeez.
And then he got in the car and drove home to the East Bay. So he was on the bridge within 5 minutes of having had these drinks. He made a 4-lane change with the signal on, but the police thought that was suspicious. They lit him up, pulled him over to Treasure Island, put him through a battery of tests over the course of about 20, 25 minutes, and his performance steadily got worse and worse to the point he couldn't even stand up. His defense was, you pulled me over before I was drunk. I wasn't drunk yet. And according to the letter of the law, I have to be drunk when you pull me over. So
Wow.
we get back to the jury room. I am elected the foreman, and I think it's a pretty open and shut case. I call for a vote of the other jurors, secret vote. They write it on a sheet of paper in a hat.
Right.
I pulled out all the papers. Guilty, not guilty, guilty, not guilty.
Oh.
5 guilties, 5 not guilties, and 2 people saying, what does reasonable doubt mean? As an attorney who has tried cases, it's mortifying to think what goes on in the jury room,
All right.
what people pay attention to. I mean, everybody bragging about how much they can drink does not help resolve the case.
So wait, I have 2 serious questions here. 1, how does a lawyer end up on a jury? And 2, are you just not smart enough to get yourself out of jury duty?
You know, I've taken to carrying books that display a certain persuasion to one side or the other, but nobody seems to pick up on it, and I always seem to get picked for my impartial appearance.
Oh, man.
Wow.
That's a hard way to do jury research, dude. I'm actually on the jury, much less the foreman. I mean, I just, you know, I said this on What Drives Us a few weeks ago, I think. I mean, one of the, and I noticed it here in California, one of the really awesome things about, you know, today's digital taxi cabs, Uber and Lyft, is that the people that were my age when I was doing utterly irresponsible and reprehensible things like drinking and driving don't do that now. For the most part, these kids are really smart, and they're like calling people. They're calling for a car. And that's really awesome. And that's sort of the, I guess, you know, I don't know why autonomous vehicles are preferable to that in a sense. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know that
the options exist and they are being used.
Yeah, it's not a zero-sum game. You can't have one and not the other. And obviously, you know, autonomous driving vehicle features add safety to human piloted vehicles. But I don't know that, again, I don't know that autonomous vehicles are the solution to all the problems that I think a lot of people think they are.
No, but it's one.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
There are lots of options right now. It's easy to call an Uber, easy to call a cab, easy to call a friend, and still it's the bad judgment to not do those things. I'm not sure having autonomous vehicles available to you makes your judgment any better.
Right.
How hard is it going to be to hail an autonomous vehicle when you're drunk? Who knows? But it's a scourge, and people are still dying. There's definitely a drop-off in the number of arrests for drunk driving, and that's great. But the number of people dying overall is still climbing.
Wow. Okay, that makes me sad. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Okay. Evan, Mark, final questions? Anything?
No, I think we covered quite a bit.
I think we have too.
Yeah.
Jim.
Yes, sir.
The last word. Anything you want to ask? Anything you want to comment on? Anything you want to just rant about?
No, I just feel bad. I ended on that sad story. No, I love this show, and you guys make me laugh, and I'm really honored that you guys invited me to be on. Thank you very much.
Wow, thank you.
Thank you, Jim. And as I said, you are welcome on the show anytime you like. You
Thank
have
you.
something Tesla related, drop me a line and come on the show, and I would love to have you talk about it. That would be fantastic. Let's do some shout outs and go home, kids. Evan, I'm counting on you not to have any shout outs as usual.
I have no shout outs.
Not even your referral code?
No, if somebody wants it, ask me for it. I'll give it to you.
Oh my God.
There you go.
Somebody wants it.
My whole thing.
No,
there are people out there that I think it's against the spirit of what was intended when it came out, and it's the people that are doing that are selling their code and offering money for people to use the code, they're going to destroy the entire program. So I'm here. People know who I am and what I contribute to Tesla, and if they need a code and they want it, they can ask me for it. I'm more than happy to give it to them. I'd love to have the prizes that go with it, but I'm not going to prostitute my code.
Oh, you. Mr. Jim, anything, please plug all of your stuff if you would.
If I knew Evan's code, I would give it out because
that's like trafficking, though. If you're the one prostituting my code, that's a whole different thing.
Are you arguing with an attorney?
Oh, it won't be the first time or the last. Don't get me going.
Anything you want to plug, Jim?
No shout outs for me. Just thanks again. It was a great show.
Well, tell us at least about your website here. What does your website do? What's it for? What are you selling on that?
Well, it's consulting services related to autonomous vehicles, their impacts on the law, policy, industry, shopping centers, cities, insurance industry. Any questions like that, I'm happy to answer. The best way to reach me is on Twitter, and I go by Autonomous Law at Safe Self Drive.
There you go.
Awesome.
So it's safeselfdrive.org, or is it Autonomous Law at Autonomous Law?
No, it's
Safe Self Drive, right?
At
Correct.
Safe Self Drive. Yeah.
At Safe Self Drive. There we go. Search Safe Self Drive.
And all the lemon law cases, you can reach me too, but I will refer them to somebody else. Thank you.
Yeah. No. Mr. Coughlin, take us home if you would, please.
Just like to thank Jim, obviously, for coming on the show. We really appreciate it. And we would also like to say, if you're watching today, please follow us through the week on our Twitter feed at The Tesla Life. You can follow us on Facebook at The Tesla Life #1. And also, please go to our YouTube channel and press the little subscribe button, and you will get auto alerted when this show kicks off. And you can join the fun at any point. Another thank you to all our live chat people out there, David B., Bruno, Derek, David G. They're just loaded in there. So it has some great conversation through the show. So please join us there on our YouTube feed. And I do have one last thing. It won't take long, but during the week, we have something else to look forward to.
Whoa.
There were some spy shots taken at the Hawthorne plant, or the Hawthorne Design Studio, and what was spied was Franz, the designer of the Model 3 and other models, was getting out of the car that he was either testing or is his. But what was interesting about this car is that the wheels are a little bit larger than the regular, and it's got the red calipers, which typically gives you an indication that's the performance model. And also on the back deck, we've got the Tesla badging, which doesn't exist on any other Model 3s. So there's a lot of speculation out there about what this means or what this is. But a number of people are saying this could be the performance model of the Model 3 that is yet to be released. So some great paparazzi photos caught in Hawthorne.
Hey, Jim, just before we go, Derek asked if you are a Tesla owner or looking to be one.
I am not a Tesla owner. Part of the reason I am not is I don't like the idea of all my data going to Tesla, knowing where I've been, preventing me from doing work on it myself. If it were just an electric car that I could work on and keep disconnected from the internet, I'd be happy to. But I don't fault anyone for owning them. I think they're incredibly safe in a crash. They're gorgeous to look at. And when full autopilot is available and safe, you can bet I will want it very much.
There you go.
All right, thanks.
An entirely fair answer. Well, you've got all of your questions answered. Thank you, Evan. Thank you, Mark. And of course, thanks for a special guest, Jim McPherson of safeselfdrive.org, for being here to answer all of our autonomous vehicle questions, both brilliant and perhaps in my case, less than brilliant. Thanks to everybody in the chat room for being there and watching us live. As always, we do this show for you. Tune in next week and find out what is going on in the Tesla life. See ya.